Okay, good evening. Hope you're doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Menachos Daf Samech Beis Amud Beis and much of Samech Gimel. As you can see on Samech Gimel Amud Beis is the end of the parak, so that will be our clean stop. And then Amir Hashem will pick up tomorrow night. Tomorrow night we will have shiur. I'm pretty sure we'll have shiur Monday night. I'll get back to you. I have a board meeting. Wednesday I have a dinner. I will be here. What? Listen. Tomorrow night I have, tomorrow night I will be here. The next night is a suffix. Tuesday is a suffix. Wednesday I will be here. Okay, and after all of that said, we are on the bottom of Samach Beis Amud Aleph, and we are on the first of the very long lines, getting into a brisa, and we're jumping straight into some lumdus. Thank you, Stan. Stan, go sit down, please. Says the Gemara as follows: Tanu Rabbanu. Zivchei Shalmei Tzibur, the korbanos that are shlamim for the tzibur, which is referring to the Shnei Kivsei Atzeres, Te'unin Tnufa le'achar shchita. They require to have tnufa after the shchita is done. Utnufasan kemos shehein dibrei Rebbe, and you would do the tnufa, the waving with the animal as it was. In other words, the animal wasn't cut, wasn't dissected. You did the shchita, the head still connected in whatever ways, it's still spinal cord connected, the flesh was cut. But the tnufa was done for the shlamim of the atzeres, the whole animal was waved. Yeah, we were discussing this the other day about how strong you'd have to be if the animal was whole. According to Rebbe, the animal was whole. That's how you did the tnufa. And we'll discuss a sophisticated approach of the Gemara as to how Rebbe got his opinion. The Chachamim no. The tnufa of the Shnei Kivtzei Atzeres was done after the animal was dissected into pieces, and it was only done with the chazah and the shok, with the breast and with the shok with the thigh. It wasn't done with any other body parts. But what is this machlokes that we have over here? You're such a child. It's unbelievable. Make your way, Shay. Make your way. Close the door behind you. Don't let it hit you. So says the Gemara, what were Rebbe and the Chachamim arguing about? So says the Gemara, Amar le Rav Chizda le Rav Hamnuna, or the opposite, Amar le Rav Hamnuna le Rav Chizda, which shows you that they were comrades and they were peers and they were colleagues. So says the Gemara, the argument between Rebbe and the Chachamim was Bedon Mina Umina versus Bedon Mina v'uki be'asra k'miflagi. This is something that we've seen before in the Gemara many times. Bedon Mina is when we learn something from the world of that sugya. So the Zivchei Shalmei Tzibur is a shlamim. So maybe we learn something from shlamim and then we apply what we learn from shlamim generally to the Zivchei Shalmei Tzibur, which is a specific example of a shlamim. Or perhaps Bedon Mina v'uki be'asra. Or perhaps we learn something from shlamim, but we apply that thing not to the Zivchei Shalmei Tzibur, but to something else. Now this is kind of abstract at the moment, and let's dig in so that we can figure out how we can understand these shitas. Says the Gemara 4 lines from the bottom. Rabbanan Savre, the rabbis were of the opinion, the Rabbanan held that the tnufa was only done because of a shok with the breast meat and with the thigh. So says the Gemara, they held don mina umina, that what we learned from the world of shlamim, which we're about to learn, was then applied to the Zivchei Shalmei Tzibur. So says the Gemara as follows. Here's stage 1. Ma zivchei shalmei yachid, just like a korban yachid of a shlamim te'unin tnufa la'achar shchita, which is a general rule by a shlamim, av zivchei shalmei tzibor te'unin tnufa la'achar shchita. So we know that there's tnufa la'achar shchita by shlamim, both by the yachid and by the tzibor. Very good. That's don mina. And what do we extract from that general rule? Umino, we apply another rule. Mahasam, when it comes to the Zivchei Shalmei Yachid, it was because of a shok. Avhacha, in regards to the Zivchei Shalmei Tzibur, it was nami because of a shok. That is the sheet of the Rabbanon. That which we learned from the Zivchei Shalmei Yachid, we took a bridge, we built it to Zivchei Shalmei Tzibur. It's all in the same machane of a shlamim, and we say that is where we learn the din from. And just like by Zivchei Shalmei Yachid, it was because of a shok, so to by Zivchei Shalmei Tzibur, it was because of a shok, and that's the sheet of the Rabbanon. However, the Rebbe Sova, Rebbe disagreed. He held don mina v'uki be'asra. He held that we learn something from shlamim, but v'uki be'asra, we put it in its place. and we don't learn it the same way that the Rabbanan did. And now let's go through the two stages of this limud. Just like by zivchei shalmei yachid, we know that waving had to happen after the shchita. Av zivchei shalmei tzibur te'unin tnufa la'achar shchita. Ve'uki be'asra, and we apply a halacha to a different location, that hasam, in regards to a general shlamim, who dechaziv ashok, aval hacha kamo shein. No, we don't apply that din over here. Ve'uki be'asra, we leave that other halacha like it is. So, kind of another way to look at this is that according to the first approach of don mina mina, everything goes over the bridge. What you learn from one, you learn to the other. So if you learn from one that there's tnufa la'achar shchita, you apply to the other. Zivchei shalmei yachid, zivchei shalmei tzibur. And the same would be true by chazav v'shok. If you hold that there's, don mino mina, that is, if it's true by zivchei shalmei yachid, it's going to be true by zivchei shalmei tzibur, and only be chazav v'shok. But Rebbe held, no, not that way. He held that not everything was transferred. Only one thing was transferred. What was transferred? The fact that we required tnufa la'achar shchita. But the din of chazav v'shok only applied to zivchei shalmei yachid. Ashein kain, Rebbe held that when it came to zivchei shalmei tzibur, it was kamo shein. The last three words on the page we delete according to the Hagos v'Tzionim in the name of the Kisvei Yad. But in short, this deep lamdus explains the machlokas between Rebbe, who held that the tnufa was done with the whole animal. You need to be pretty strong. These animals were not all, they were smaller than cows, but they were still 70, 60, they were not small animals. Yeah, they're really, these guys were, all that working out. They really had some good muscle tone there. It was very, very heavy. And remember what we said. You had to extend it out and in and up and down. And as we saw yesterday, some shitas that perhaps right to left also. One way or the other. It's very heavy. So the Rebbe held that it was kimo shein, and the Rabbanan held that the tnufa that was done the achar shchita for the zivchei shalmei tzibur, for the shnei kivsei atzeres, that it was done only because of a shok. So let's turn to the top of Samach Beis and Beis. All of this was approach number one of the machlokes between Rebbe and the Rabbanon, where Rebbe held that the tnufa was done with the whole animal, and the Rabbanon held it was done only because of a shok. Samach Beis and Beis, top line, top words. Rav Papa Amar, no. That is not what their machlokes is about. So this is answer number two. Tekule alma don mina umina, who everyone agrees that between the two approaches of don mina umina on the one side, and don mina v'uki abasra, v'uki, what was the language? Abasra, v'uki be'asra. So there, everyone agrees that it's don mina umina. Now, if you say don mina umina, then it should be chazav v'shok. So then, how do the Rabbanan understand? So says the Gemara, v'hainu taima de Rebbe. Why is it? If we hold don mina umina, that means that that even zivchei shalmei tzibur should be chazav v'shok. So then, how does Rebbe learn? So says the Gemara, v'hainu taima de Rebbe ki hasam mahasam davar she. Matana lekoin, avhacha davar shematana lekoin. It has to be that which is a matana for the kohen, and the zivchei shalmei tzibur, the whole thing goes to the kohanim. It's not because of domino mina and domino v'uki be'asra, but rather it's just a din in the mitzias of who gets the meat, and because the one who gets the meat of the zivchei shalmei tzibur is the kohanim, so then the tnufa, this is the lamdus, the tnufa reflects who gets the meat. So who gets to meet the Kohen? They don't only get the chaz of a shok. By zivchei shalmei tzibur, they get the whole thing. So give them the whole thing. Therefore, the tnufa has to be the whole thing. So approach number one is that Rebbe held don mina v'uki be'asra. Then the second answer is no. Even Rebbe holds don mina, but he says that there's a link between that with which we do tnufa and that which is shaykh by the Kohen. And because by zivchei shalmei tzibur, the Kohen gets the whole animal, therefore the tnufa has to be done with the whole animal. Ravina, third answer to understand the machlokes, Rebbe and the Chachamim. Ravina Amar, Dekule Alma Domina V'uki Be'asra. I disagree. He says the exact opposite. So now we have a three-way machlokes Tanoim. We have a three-way machlokes, not Tanoim. A three-way machlokes as to what we do with this world of Don Mina Mina and Don Mina V'uki Abasra. According to the first approach, Don mina umina and don mina v'uki be'asra is machlokes Rebbe and the Rabbanon. According to Rav Papa, no, it's not. Everyone agrees. Don mina mina. And according to Ravina, it's not a machlokas between them because everyone holds the kule al midom mina v'uki be'asra. But if you say don mina v'uki abasra, so then it turns out that it should really be like Rebbe, because the svar of don mina v'uki abasra means that we don't take everything from zivchei shalmei yachid and apply it to zivchei shalmei tzibur, and therefore, even though by zivchei shalmei yachid the tenufa was done because of a shok, but according to Rebbe, within the camp of don mina v'uki be'asra, there we would say that that the whole animal was shaykh by tenufa. That's how they did tenufa, with the whole animal. So if you hold dom minav uki ba'asra, then how do the Rabbanon explain their shita? So says the Gemara, behind Utaima the Rabbanon, the reason why the rabbis were of the opinion that the zivchei atzeres, the shnei kivsei atzeres, why their tenufa was done because of a shok, was because Shalmehem. The pasuk has a plural word. If you look on the full pasuk you have on the side here, Vayikra Zayin Lamed Daled. I don't want to read the whole pasuk because it's very long. Me'es b'nei Yisrael mizivchei Shalmehem. So what we see is a plural language of Shalmehem. And I'm kind of adding in a bit of a tzushtel, but I think this is pshat in the Gemara that when we say Shalmehem, there's a plural. A plural is ribuyahu. So that means more than one shlamim has a din of chaz of a shok. So really, we all know that zivchei shalmei yachid, the tenufa is done b'chaz of a shok. Shalmehem is a ribuya, which means that there is another shlamim that is going to have a tenufa of chaz of a shok. What's that? It must be the zivchei shalmei tzibor, also known as the shnei kivtzei atzeres. So 3 different approaches as to how to explain the machlokas between Rebbe and the Chachamim. Now the next 6 lines are a pure quote from the Mishnah. So we'll learn it, but we'll learn it quickly because we already spent time learning it yesterday. Reb Shimon Omer, Shlosha minin te'unin shlosha mitzvos. There are 3 different kinds of animals, and there are 3 mitzvos that apply to those 3 animals, but shtayim b'chol echad u'shlishis ein bahem. Every animal only has 2 out of the 3 mitzvos, with the 3rd one not applying. And here are the details that we saw in our Mishnah on Shabbos. Ve'iluhein zivchei shalmei yachid. When we talk about a korban shlamim of a yachid, that's 1 animal. V'zivchei shalmei tzibor, which is the shnei kivsei atzeres. Ve'asham mitzora, the asham is used in the tahara process of a leper. So says the Gemara, let's go through each of them and see which ones have which mitzvos. Zivchei shalmei yachid, when it comes to a korban yachid, which 2 mitzvos apply and which one does not? Well, mitzvah number 1 is te'unin smicha chaim. It needs to have the pressure that's pushed on the animal's head. That's number 1. Utznufa shchutin, and it needs to have waving with the animal after it's shechted. But whereas those 2 things are true by zivchei shalmei yachid, ve'ein bahen tnufa chaim. We don't have to do any waving of the animal while the waving is alive. So zivchei shalmei yachid has smicha and tnufa shchuta. Smicha chaim and tnufa shchuta. The second animal is zivchei shalmei tzibur, which is our shnei kivsei atzeres that we've been discussing thus far today. What 2 mitzvos apply? Te'unin tnufa chaim u'shchutin. It requires 2 wavings, 1 while it's alive and 1 after it's shechted. But what's missing from the zivchei shalmei tzibur is ve'ein bahem smicha. And the 3rd animal is the asham mitzora that's used in the tahara process of the mitzora. So says the Gemara there, what mitzvos apply to the asham mitzora? It's ton smicha utnufa chai. It requires to have smicha and waving while the animal is alive. However, ve'ein bo tnufa shachut. So all of this is in the Mishnah. So all 3 of these animals, the zivchei shalmei yachid, the zivchei shalmei tzibur, and the asham mitzora, each of them has only 2 out of the 3 relevant mitzvos. What's bothering the Gemara, and we're going to discuss all 3 of this until we get all 3 versions of this till we get to the bottom of the page. What's bothering the Gemara is why don't we say that all 3 mitzvos apply to all 3 animals? Why do we limit zivchei shalmei tzibur to say that it doesn't have tnufa chaim? Why do we say by the zivchei shalmei yachid? Why do we say by the zivchei shalmei tzibur there's no smicha? And why do we say by the asham mitzora that there's no tnufa shachut? That's the Gemara's push. It says the Gemara a third of the way down at the 2 dots as we open up this piece of Gemara. That which you said, which doesn't apply, which we saw in the 2 dots above, and in our Mishnah on Shabbos, you said that when it comes to Zivchei Shalmei Yachid, that there is no Tnufa Chaim, that there's no waving of the animal while it's alive. Perhaps you're wrong. Mikal v'chomer, maybe we should say that when it comes to Zivchei Shalmei Yochid, that there is Tnufa Chai. How could we develop that idea? Like this. Uma Zivchei Shalmei Tzibor, the second mitzvah that was discussed in the Mishnah, there by the Zivchei Shalmei Tzibor, she'ein te'unin tzmicha chaim, there by the Zivchei Shalmei Tzibor, the mitzvah that was precluded from there was putting smicha on the animal, but nevertheless te'unin tnufa chaim. Well, Zivchei Shalmei Yochid she'te'unin smicha chaim, eino din she'te'unin tenufa chaim. Kal v'chomer. Right, very reasonable jump. Why don't we say that when it comes to Zivchei Shalmei Yochid, why don't we say that it requires Tenufa Chaim? So the Gemara says that the answer to this question is that when it comes to the Zivchei Shalmei Yochid, there is no Tenufa Chaim, because Mi'et Rachmana Gabe Zivchei Shalmei Tzibor, the word Osam Lemeute Zivchei Shalmei Yochid, that not every animal has the same exact din. Only Osam, only by Zivchei Shalmei Tzibor do we have Tenufa Chaim, but Lemeute Zivchei Shalmei Yochid. In other words, you're saying a good Kal V'chomer, but we have a drasha that goes against your Kal V'chomer, and therefore, when it comes to Zivchei Shalmei Yochid, even though it's tempting to say that all three halachos apply, and even Tenufa Chaim, you cannot say that there's Tenufa Chaim by the Zivchei Shalmei Yochid because of the word Osam, which precludes it. And the next question, V'yihyu Zivchei Shalmei Tzibor Te'unin Smicha. We said in our Mishnah, re-quoted right here a third of the way down, that when it comes to the second type of animal, of Zivchei Shalmei Tzibor, we said that there's no smicha. Why would you say there's no smicha? I'll give you a kal v'chomer as to why there should be smicha by Zivchei Shalmei Tzibor. Mikal v'chomer. We're 2/3 of the way down, 5 lines before the wide lines. Uma Zivchei Shalmei Yochid. We're going to make a comparison between Zivchei Shalmei Yochid and Zivchei Shalmei Tzibor. Just like when it comes to the korban of a shlamim of a Yochid, she'ein te'unin tenufa, where there is no require of tenufa chaim, nevertheless te'unin smicha, we see that by Zivchei Shalmei Yochid, there is no tenufa chaim, but there is smicha. Well, Zivchei Shalmei Tzibor, when it comes to the second category of animal, which is our subject of discussion right now, she'te'unin tenufa chaim, there we see that there is a mitzvah of tenufa chaim, eino din she'te'unin smicha. Well, we have our kal v'chomer. Kal v'chomers are very strong. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Shloshes Amidos She'Torah Nidreshes Behin, and one of them is kal v'chomer. So why don't we say that by Zivchei Shalmei Tzibor that there's smicha? So Amar Ravina, Gemiri, we have a tradition. We have a halacha l'Moshe miSinai. That's what Rashi says here, 7-8 lines from the bottom. Gemiri miSinai. That's an interesting comment. First of all, it doesn't say halacha l'Moshe miSinai. And second of all, why do you say it at all? You don't. If you've learned this much of Shas, you know what the word Gemiri means. We have a tradition. Does Gemiri ever not? Gemara Gemiri, I don't know. I have no idea. Anyways, the Gemara says that only shtei smichos b'tzibor. There's only 2. There aren't 3. And therefore, the case of Zivchei Shalmei Tzibor doesn't have smicha. Now let's look at the third of the korbanos, the Asha Mitzora. We had said by the Asha Mitzora that the Asha Mitzora was limited from Tnufa Shachut. That once the animal was shechted, by the Asha Mitzora, there was no Tnufa. So says the Gemara, last of the short lines, V'hei Asha Mitzora ta'un Tnufa Shachut mikal v'chomer. Perhaps we should say that the Asha Mitzora, our Mishnah says that there is no Tnufa Shachut, but maybe we could argue from a kal v'chomer perspective that when it comes to an Asha Mitzora, there is Tnufa Shachut mikal v'chomer. What would the kal v'chomer be that would try and convince us that an Asha Mitzora should have Tnufa Shachut? So the Gemara says, Ma Zivchei Shalmei Yochid. We're comparing the first and third. Just like the first korban that we discussed in our Mishnah, the Zivchei Shalmei Yochid, she'ein te'unin Tnufa Chaim, but te'unin Tnufa Shchutin. That when it comes to the Zivchei Shalmei Yochid, you're right, there is no waving of the animal when it's alive. But it does require waving of the animal once it's been shechted. Well, Asha Mitzora she'ta'un Tnufa Chai, the Asha Mitzora that does require waving of the animal while it's alive, eino din she'ta'un Tnufa Shachut. So we see a kal v'chomer. So perhaps we should argue, not like our Mishnah, perhaps we should argue that the Asha Mitzora should have Tnufa Shachut. So here too, the Gemara escapes the question and says, "Mi'et Rachmana gabe shalmei yachid also lemeute ashem mitzora." So we have by the world of zivchei shalmei yachid that there is a din of tenufa shachud. You're right, but the word oso limits tenufa shachud to the world of zivchei shalmei yachid, and it therefore does not apply to ashem mitzora. So this rounds out that aspect of our Mishnah. Our Mishnah had told us about three different korbanos, about Zivchei Shalmei Yachid, Zivchei Shalmei Tzibor, and Asher Mitzora. And there were three halachos, a double tnufa, one before the animal was dead called tnufa chai, one was when the animal was dead called tnufa shachud, and a third halacha that had to do with smicha. So the Mishnah told us that only two apply to each of these korbanos, never does three. And the reason why that was true is because we had mi'utim, which precluded the one of these three mitzvahs from applying to each of these three animals respectively. Very good. We're two lines from the bottom on Samach Beis and Beis. Mirza Hashem will get to the Mishnah. Hopefully we'll get there. We have a lot of ground to cover. Tanu Rabbanon. Chamisha sheheviu korban echad. Let's say that there were 5 people that brought a korban. Echad menif al yedei kulam. One person is allowed to be menif. He's allowed to do the waving for all of the other people. V'ha'isha, if a woman brings a korban, kohen menif al yada. The kohen is allowed to represent and do the tznufa for her. So this is, we learned this on Shabbos Shtekol, that she does have a requirement for it. She just doesn't do it herself. So I don't know how this works. Is there a minui shlichus? I did this morning at a bris. What? What were you expecting?
It's like, it should be almost like the other way around.
Ba'avor kulam.
Kind of. Al Yudei,
Sounds like they're doing it.
Kulam, you say the opposite. Kulam menif and al yad.
Al yado. Al yado. Al yad ha'echad. Very good catch on the language. Echad menif al yudei kulam. Oh yeah, no, I know that feeling. But it says it's on Daf Tzadi Gimel. This quote. So when we get to that brisa, we'll have to take a closer look at the lashon. Maybe it's touched up in the Gemara. Okay, v'chein hasholech korbanosav mimedinas hayam. Let's say that someone in Chicago sends their korban to Yerushalayim. Kohen menif al yado. Oh, now it bothers me. It's a funny syntax. Very, very interesting. Okay, Samach Gimel Amud Aleph at the top of the page, a new Mishnah. Mirza Hashem will do 2 Mishnayos. Let's go. Ha'omer harei alai b'machavas. We know that there are different types of korbanos mincha. If a person says that they are bringing upon themselves or obligating themselves with harei alai for a machavas, so then lo yavi b'marcheshes. Then you cannot bring. And these are different types of pans, and we'll discuss what the differences were, machlokes in the Mishnah, as to what the differences were between these types of pans. So if you say machavas, don't bring a marcheshes, b'marcheshes lo yavi b'machavas. You got one, meaning you didn't fulfill your obligation, right? You said machavas, so then you can't walk away scot-free if you did marcheshes. You have to stick to your guns. If you said harei alai b'machavas, then lo yavi b'marcheshes. If you said harei alai b'marcheshes, lo yavi b'machavas. Asks the Mishnah, ma ben machavas the marcheshes? So says the Gemara, this is subject to a discussion in the Tanaim. Marcheshes yesh la kisui. Marcheshes has a cover. Machvas ein la kisui divi Rabbi Yossi Aglili. According to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, the difference between the two is whether or not there is a cover. But Reb Chanina ben Gamliel doesn't agree. Omer, what is the difference between a marcheshes and a machvas? Marcheshes amuka. It's a deeper pan, uma'aseha rochshen, and the actions, meaning when there's cooking happening in there, it's rochshen, meaning it's kind of making noise. And if you take a look at Rashi, he points out on the second line that, if you look at the first Rashi, Rochshen, Shakli Amuk Vahaya Kol Hashemed B'makom Echad, all of the oil congregated at the bottom, Ukshemaniach Adam Etzba'o Al HaMincha Nod Hashemen B'socha. When you put in the mincha, all the oil moves around, it's like bubbling, it's popping around. I know it's not, I'm not right, but like if you pour an egg into a boiling hot pan with oil, everything is bubbling, right? So it's rachashin. So it's making some noise. Rachash. It's got some sound. Marcheshes, Rashi says, Lashon remes. The Metargimin and Rachashin. Little creepy crawlies. Called haromes al haaretz. Rachashin is what Unkla says. So the Gemara says that the machvas, the marcheshes, which is amuka, u'ma'aseh harochshin, it's like a noisy cooking process. However, skip the parentheses, machvas is tsafa, u'ma'aseh hakashin. No, it's on the top of the pan. I'm thinking like a crepe, like it's flat. There's no rim. You just put the matzah on top. You put the flour on top. At least that's what it says. Tsafa, it's kind of floating on the top. It's not in the depth of a pan. Like our frying pans would be a marcheshes, because those are amuka. And if you had I had at home like a very, very flat, I had a very flat pan. What? Yeah, yeah. Oh, I was thinking Southern Fried Chicken, but yeah. It depends. There's nothing wrong with that. It depends what home you come from. Yeah. So that would be the difference. And machlokes Tanaim. Now that we're going to get into why each of them hold that their respective shitas. The first is that the marcheshes has a cover in the second one, and the machvas doesn't. Versus Reb Chanina ben Gamliel, who says that it's the depth of the kli. It says the Gemara 6-7 lines down. My time of the Reb Yossi. Why does Reb Yossi hold that the difference between a marcheshes and a machvas is a cover, where the marcheshes has a cover and the machvas doesn't? Ilema marcheshes de asya archushe halev. Marcheshes is like the marcheshes halev, the things that are in your heart, and they're covered, right? So therefore, marcheshes is a covered. Kidichsiv rachash libi dvar tov. Then it's all inside my heart. Umachvas to osya amachvuye hapeh, and a machvas is from machvuye hapeh, the things that are articulated by your mouth. Kida'amer inshe minbach nevuche. That minbach machvas, similar word. It's the words barking, literally. It's how. Well, I think that's even modern Hebrew. That when a dog barks, I think it's menabeach, I believe, in modern Hebrew. Could be wrong. But that's what the Gemara says. If that's what you're saying, ilema, that's why you're saying that. Well, I could flip it on the head quickly. Dilma, maybe perhaps play on the pasuk from Bereshis. Lama nechbeisa livroach. Why did you hide, covered? Maybe that one should be covered. And marcheshes to asya archushe. Kedamrish, you have a marcheshan sivsose, that he was moving his lips, but I had no idea what he said, right? But still, it's visible that he's moving his lips. So if you're going to bring me Mara Makomos in one direction, that Marcheshes is covered and Machvas is uncovered, there's vast Mara Makomos in the Torah. I'll flip it on its head and you'd be wrong. Ella, Gemara Gemirila. So Rabbi Yossi Aglili had a Mesorah. He had and this answers the question I asked on the previous page. Gemara Gemirila is not always halacha l'Moshe Sinai. It's just what he heard from his Rebbe. There's no halacha l'Moshe Sinai that is machvas.
You call halacha Sinai just a Mesorah of some sort. Like, is there a difference? Like, I liked your question.
Well, you like the first half of my question, which is, does Misinai mean not halacha l'Moshe Sinai, but he had a Mesorah from? It's hard to say if it's Misinai. It's hard to say that it's not halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Yeah. Lo yodea. Don't know. Okay, that brings us to the two dots, a quarter of the way down. Reb Chanina ben Gamliel Omer. Remember, he was of the opinion that it had to do with the depth of the kli, that the marcheshes was amuka u'ma'aseh harochshin, and the machvas was tzafa u'ma'aseh hakashin. So where did he get his opinions from? Marcheshes amuka. He knew that a marcheshes was a deeper kli. Tichsiv, because the pasuk says v'chol na'aseh be marcheshes, in the marcheshes. Just put the stuff in the pan. Not on the pan, but in the pan. And machvas tafa dechsiv v'al machvas. Clean, simple Mara Makomos. Good. What if, however, a person says they're going to bring a marcheshes, but they don't say be marcheshes? That's the next question. Tanu Rabbanan, third of the way down. Beishamai omrim haomer hare alai marcheshes. Now, he's talking about bringing a korban mincha, but he doesn't use the language that Reb Chanina ben Gamliel would have preferred. Because if we know that a marcheshes is amuka from the pasuk of v'chol nase be marcheshes, But I didn't say Harei alai b'marcheshes. I said Harei alai marcheshes. Do I then mean to say, when I say Harei alai marcheshes, that I'm going to get the marcheshes pan? Or do I mean I have to bring a korban mincha in a marcheshes? Which one is it? Is it the korban mincha, or just go get that pan out of the cabinet? So Beis Shammai is not comfortable. He's not willing to paskin. This is not comfortable. The Safka lahu Beis Shammai was a doubt to them. Iyal shum kli nikru. Was it that it was just to go get the marcheshes kli? Wasn't the din in a korban mincha? Just go get the kli. It's like saying, please get the frying pan out of the cabinet. Or al shum ma'aseh, and based on the function of the kli, which is the korban mincha, he wasn't sure. So he said that it's munachat shiavu eliyahu. He wasn't sure. Ubesil omrim kli haya b'mikdash umarcheshes shema. There was a kli. It was called the marcheshes kli. It was hanging on a hook, and underneath the hook it said, "This is a marcheshes kli." V'dome kimin kalbus amuk. It had a very funky shape to it. It was like a ches shaped utensil. Amuk, and it had a depth to it. Uchshabatzek munach besocho. And when bread was put into it, domekimin tpuche ha-barasim, a certain type of apple, uchemin belute ha-yavanim, and a certain type of acorn meal of the Greeks, but basically it would take the shape of that article of that kli. Ve'omer v'chol nase b'marcheshes ve'al machmas alma al shuma kelem nikru v'lo al shuma asayim. So Beis Hillel did feel comfortable saying this was not a korban mincha. It was only a question of go get that kli. So if I were to say today, Harei alai marcheshes, Beis Shammai would be Mesupak. Beis Hillel would say there is no korban mincha here. Just go get the kli out of the cabinet and do your obligation, and then you'd be done. That brings us to a new Mishnah halfway down on Samach Gimel Amud Aleph. The Mishnah says, Harei alai b'tanur, that if a person says that they're going to make something in a tanur, lo yavi ma'afeh kupach v'lo ma'afeh re'afim u'ma'afeh yoros ha'aravim. You have to use only a tanur. You cannot use a kupach oven. You cannot use a re'afim oven, different types of ovens, and you cannot use the pots of Arabs, which was a style of their cooking back in the day. Rabbi Yehuda Omer disagree. Rotza maybe ma'afeh kupach, no problem at all. We're good to go. Why are you being so rigid? He didn't mean tanur mamish. Any type of oven is fine. The Mishnah continues, Harei alai minchas ma'afeh. Let's say that a person uses a language of the mincha of a ma'afeh. Lo yavi mechsa chalos u'mechsa rakikin. You can't use some breads and some crackers. Everything has to be the same. Reb Shimon matir mipnei shu korban echad. I disagree, because minchas ma'afeh is a broad term. Echatesi that it's only chalos or only rakikin. It's minchas ma'afeh. It's a broader terminology. So let's start to pick this apart from the Brisa. Tanu Rabbanon. The rabbis have taught us in the Brisa as follows: Ma'afeh tanur. This is a pasuk. The pasuk says in Vayikra Beis Daled, "B'chi sakriv korban mincha ma'afeh tanur." When a person brings a korban that is a korban mincha that is baked in an oven, so back inside, ma'afeh tanur v'lo ma'afeh kupach v'lo ma'afeh re'afim v'lo ma'afeh yoros ha'aravim. That's exactly like the Tanakama of our Mishnah. This brisa aligns perfectly. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, I disagree. Tanur shnei pa'amim. We have the word tanur listed twice, and therefore we have nothing to worry about. One pasuk is the pasuk we said, v'chol mincha asher te'afeh betanur, and the next pasuk is v'chi sakriv korban mincha ma'afeh sanur. So we have it twice, shnei pa'amim. Lahachsher ma'afeh kupach. He says that if you just say that Harei alai ma'afeh tanur, it will be broad enough to include other types of ovens, not al svara, but because we have the word tanur twice, and therefore it's a ribui. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that we're allowed to say ma'afeh tanur and include ma'afeh kupach, because we have tanur twice. Reb Shimon Omer, tanur shnei pa'amim, echad she'taf yasim b'tanur, ve'echad she'yakteshin b'tanur. No. It's not a ribui to include a ma'afeh kupach. You're not allowed, if you say ma'afeh tanur, it's only one kind. What does each tanur teach us? Number one is that the afiyah has to be in a tanur, very limited. And the second is that the hekdeshan happens in the tanur, becomes holy in the oven. Did you know that? That a korban mincha becomes holy in the oven. So the Gemara questions this right away. It says Gemara, Mi islay the Reb Shimon hai svara that the korban mincha becomes sanctified in the tanur. That can't be because v'atnan Reb Shimon Omer leolam habe ragil omar shtei halechem v'lechem aponim ksheros be'azor ksheros bebeis pagi. He says that that they should be considered kosher in beis pagi. Now, if you say that it's baked in beis pagi, that's a problem because beis pagi was outside of the azara. If you remember from Maseches Tamid 7 years ago, because it was before the turn of the Shas cycle that we started in September of 2019, so it was a year earlier, 2018, whatever it was. Beis Pagi was not located inside the Azara. So therefore, how can you say that it's even in the right place that the oven should make it Kaddish? The Gemara teaches and says, you're 100% right. Amar Rava, Ema, what I mean to say is Sheyehei Hekdeshan Lishum Tanur, that I'm going to sanctify it. It will become sanctified on its own, but it's going to be in an oven at some point. It was informative, but it wasn't transformative. I didn't mean to tell you that it was going to be inside that it becomes holy in the oven. It doesn't become holy in the oven. We're at the 6 lines from the bottom of the page on Samach Gimel Amud Aleph, heading toward the end of the parak. The Gemara says, we had quoted our Mishnah, Harei alai minchas mafe lo yavi mechzer. You're not allowed to bring half chalos and half rakik, and that's what our Mishnah said. So let's learn this up. Tanu Rabbanan v'chi sakriv kshetakriv lasos davar rishus. When you're doing a korban mincha that is not obligatory, it's optional. Korban mincha. Amar Yehuda minayin laomer. Harei alai mincha ma'afesh lo yavi mechzer chalos and mechzer rakik, and obviously reflecting the sheet of our Tanakama, not Reb Shimon. But the Tanakama holds this way. It's actually Rabbi Yehuda is listed in our Mishnah as well. So Rabbi Yehuda Shita, where does he get that from? That you're not allowed to bring half chalos and half rakikin. Tam lomar korban mincha, korban echad amarti lach v'lo shnayim v'shalosh korbanos. That's what it says. Korban mincha, not korbanos mincha. So bring me one thing. Stop bringing me multiple things. I only want you to bring one thing. Oh, so that's the Shita Rabbi Yehuda. But Amar lo Reb Shimon, turning to the top of Samach Gimel Amud Beis, Reb Shimon argues with Rabbi Yehuda. Again, Rabbi Yehuda was of the opinion that when we say that you're bringing a korban mincha, you can't do half-seas of half chalos and half rakik, and they only have to be one type. Reb Shimon says, no, it can be any type, because you said korban mincha doesn't matter. Let's see his svara. V'chinemar korban shnei pa'amim. It doesn't say korban twice. V'halo lo nemar ela korban echad. Yet, v'nemar bo chalos urakikin. Your argument, Rabbi Yehuda, is the exact opposite of how Chumash seems to appear. The Chumash seems to say that it only has the word korban once, but the Torah details what that looks like by calling them chalos or rakikin. Me'ata, from there I should therefore assume, ratza lahavi chalos maybe, rakikin maybe, mechza chalos and mechza rakikin maybe, no problem at all. Not only that, you can mix them up. A bolalan v'komis mishneim. You can mix them up and do a kmitza. And v'im komatz v'ola b'yado me'echad al shneim. If you did the kmitza, you mix it all up, and you happen to have grabbed exactly only one, either chalos or rakikin, yotza, both of them are yotze. You're allowed to mix them up. You're allowed. So Rabbi Yehuda, I don't understand what you're saying. Your argument that it doesn't say korban twice, that you said at the bottom, that was his argument. Talmud Lomar korban mincha, he said korban echad amarti lach. Reb Shimon's like, that doesn't work, because the pasuk says korban once, and then it says chalos and rakikim, which are different korbanos. So I don't understand what you're saying. So says the Gemara, Reb Yossi ben Reb Yehuda Omer, Minayin leomer harei alai minchas ma'afeh shelo yavi mechza chalos u'mechza rakikin, similar to Rabbi Yehuda, his father, which we're going to get back to. Remember, Rabbi Yehuda and Reb Shimon, now we have a third shita. What did Rabbi Yehuda say? No mixing chalos and rakikin. Reb Shimon says you can mix chalos and rakikin. Now, look at this shita of the son of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi ben Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Minayin leomer harei alai minchas ma'afeh shelo yavi mechza chalos u'mechza rakikin. He agrees with his father that you can't bring. I said my agreement was minchas ma'afeh. You can't bring chalos and rakikin. Talmud Omer v'chol mincha lo sefer b'saner, long pasuk. V'chol nase b'marcheshes v'al machvas l'kohen hamakir v'osel lo siyeh v'chol mincha blula b'shem v'chareva l'chol b'nei Aaron tiyeh. Ma v'chol ha'amur lemata shnei minin chalukin. At the end of the pasuk, when it said b'chol, it was talking about belula and chareva. That's what the pasuk says, right? 2 lines above. V'chol mincha belula b'shemen v'chareva. Very, very different types of korbanos. Belula has oil, chareva is dry. So if at the end of the pasuk v'chol means 2 different types, af v'chol ha'amur lemala shnei minin chalukin. So he says those are obviously very different, and you therefore can't bring both. They have to be only one. That's how we know that they're different. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda, Shapir, Kamar, Reb Shimon. That's a very good argument. Rabbi Yehuda has to look back at Reb Shimon's argument from the top of the page, that if in fact the pasuk says korban only one time, and then the pasuk says chalos urikikin, so how does Rabbi Yehuda get out of that? So says the Gemara, Amar Lach, Kevan dechsid bashemen, because it had bashemen bashomen technically, because the pasuk says v'chisakriv korban mincha ma'afes sanur solas chalos matzos belulos bashemen urkikei matzos meshuchim bashemen. It says it twice back in the Gemara. Keman dechsid korban dami. You're right. It doesn't say korban twice, but because it says shemen shomen, it's keilu we say it twice. Reb Shimon, what would he say back to that? He said, "What?" He'll say back to that. What are you talking about? Iloksiv b'shemen bashamen. If we didn't have that double language over there, I would have made another mistake. Hava amina dafka mechza chalos v'dafka rikikin. I might have thought that you specifically require half chalos and half rikikin. Aval chalos lechudahu rikikun lechudahu emalo. I might have thought that any one of them wouldn't have worked. That we needed halfsies. Kamash malon, the language of bashem and bashamen, but not the way you learned it. So anyways, their shitas both still stand. The shita Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. The Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that when we use a broader language, you still cannot use chalos and rikikin. And according to Rabbi Shimon, you are allowed to use them. Now, let's just refer to one last piece of this and then we'll wrap for the day here. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda hainu avuha. It seems that Rabbi Yehuda that we started with, who said that you're not allowed to mix chalos and rikikin, is the same as his son Rabbi Yossi, who said by Ma'afed that you're not allowed to mix mechza chalos and mechza rikikin. So then we don't need your opinion. You sound just like your father. Says the Gemara, Ika beinahu diavad, what we would call b'di'eved. Remember, this is a big misnomer. B'di'eved is from b'di'i avai. If you already did it, what's the halacha? The i avai. That's where b'di'eved comes from. So let's look at Rashi to see what the sheets are. Rashi says, third of the way down, Rabbi Yehuda, the alif time mi korban echad, diavad ksheros. Oh, so now we know who's who. That b'di'eved, Rabbi Yehuda would be matir. But according to Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, he would not be matir b'di'eved. He would say it's puzzle even b'di'eved. Hadron Allah kol Menachos Baruch Hashem. We finished the 5th parak of Maseches Menachos. We'll stop right here. Mir Hashem will pick up tomorrow night. Wishing you all a beautiful night.